My guest today on my children's TV and theatre podcast is Paul Vates, who worked on the theatre shows like Mr. Men, Postman Pat, and loads of children's educational shows for the BBC. So please welcome Paul Vates. Well, hi, Paul. My first
Hello.
question is, how did you get into the theatre business?
Well, that's it chose me. I think I started at school, didn't have much of a choice. I did drama to the old-fashioned O level, then
Mhm,
took it to A level and did youth theatre, after school clubs, and so we did school plays,
mhm.
and that led inevitably to me leaving home from Leeds in Yorkshire and going all the way to London to drama school.
How did you get to be in the Mr. Men and the Postman Pat tour?
Well, that's just a bizarre circumstance of I was in a very small touring pantomime company doing a show, no idea what it was, and I saw an advert in the Stage. I think it was the Stage, the old newspaper that used to advertise jobs, and it was literally we're looking for an actor in the Mr. Men tour, and I contacted them, got an audition. I do remember going to Epsom Playhouse for the audition,
Mhm.
and I met the producer and the director, and basically did. I think I went straight from a performance of the pantomime to the audition, so I was already hyped up, ready to go, exactly what they were looking for, and I sort of walked into the job.
Did you met the original Postman Pat actor Don Cran while you were doing Postman Pat?
No, I didn't. I think I was one of sort of his replacements, really. That there was so when we were on tour with Postman Pat, um, there were so many stories about him and previous tours that it was like he's on a pedestal. That's a bit of a shock. I don't know anything about him, never met him, but I do know of his name.
Do you met any of the original TV team while you doing Mr. Men and Postman Pat tour?
No, didn't meet anybody. As far as I'm aware, I don't. I think they did come to see some of the Post and Pat shows, but I never got to meet them. I think they were whisked away before we said hello.
What's it like doing a children's TV show on stage and playing those characters?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed thing. I mean, in the Mister Men, I wasn't one of the Mister Men. I have to say that the Mister Men and Little Misses were all played by dancers in uh, full character, as it were. But each show had two people, like a bit like Laurel and Hardy, a silly man and an even more silly man, who we were the humans in their Mister Men world. So that was always interesting because that we had an instant rapport with the children, because of course the Mister Men themselves on stage with us in our tour didn't talk. That was all pre-recorded.
Mhm.
So when we spoke with a Mr. Man, we were actually speaking with a pre-recorded script.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely amazing watching the audiences react as each Mr. Man was introduced to the show. There would be this, as they came on stage, this
Mhm.
buzz of excitement about it couldn't really be Mr. Nosy, could it? And lo and behold, Mr. Nosy comes on stage slowly because you only want to see his nose first.
Mhm.
So bit by bit, his nose comes on stage, and the audience and the children go wild with excitement. And finally, he bundles on in full view and gets a huge round of applause. That's such a lovely thing to see.
What about working with Postman Pat? What was it like to do that Postman Pat stage show as well?
Postman Pat was excellent from the responses from the audiences, partly because the way in our show it started with the scenery of Greendale going off into the distance and a tiny van in the distance as the opening tune begins. The van just driving up and down over the hills, from one side of the stage to the other,
Mhm.
and then it comes and it's much bigger,
Mhm.
going from one side of the stage to the other, and then finally I appear driving the full size van, which always got a massive cheer. You could almost feel the cheer coming through the windscreen of the van, which was uh, really exciting. I think we were very lucky in our tours for the timing of them, because even though we went to every top theatre in the country,
Mhm.
all number one venues, as we call them, they were all sold out. And so the crowds were amazing. And Jess used to get gifts left at the stage door. Um, really hilarious. Jess got more than I did. Just typical.
On that tour, one of your cast members, Emma Weaver, aka Bella from the Tweenies. What's it like working with her?
Yeah, well, that was very exciting because I remember her because, of course, she played my son. If you see what I mean,
Yeah.
she was playing the son, and she went off to do that. And then, funny enough, a few years later, I end up working with all the Tweenies in a completely different series. But sadly, Emma wasn't there. Otherwise, we'd have met up again. But I do remember many laughs, especially her very curly wig that she had to wear.
Yeah. What are the highlights from those tours?
I think for me, the highlights um, were not just seeing all the wonderful theatres that this country has to offer, but seeing how something like Postman Pat or the Mr. Men really means a lot to children.
Hmm.
And there was one thing we were determined to do in our version and touring shows was to make sure the parents were involved as well. It
Hmm.
wasn't just a children's show aimed at children. It was aimed at the parents as well. After all, they'd paid. And
Hmm.
half the audience were adults, so they deserved entertaining too.
Hmm.
So we always made sure it was full family entertainment. But I think the biggest thing that I always got was the genuine buzz, not just from the audience, I ought to say. There'd usually be some excitement from the stage technicians that worked in each theatre, that when we pulled up, they got excited too.
Hmm.
These hardened technicians that have seen everything from rock and roll to ballet also got excited about Postman Pat and the Mr. Men. Now that's a lovely thing to see.
Any funny moments from those tours?
I think for me the biggest ones were going to things like Sadler's Wells Theatre, just to go out on famous stages like that. There was some. It's the funny things I think that stand out when a Mr. Man accidentally falls off the front of the stage, or children get so excited when they're seeing Postman Pat they run down to the front of the auditorium and shout at the top of their voices that Jess is behind the van when I'm looking for Jess, and this I do remember this little boy. I think it was in Lewisham ran all the way to the front and I silenced the audience, wanted to know what he wanted to say. And he just shouted as though it was the most important thing in the world that Jess is behind me on the wall. And I just think, wow, children are so excited and engrossed by these stories and these characters. That's so warming, heartwarming.
Do you do any open days as your characters?
We didn't. What we did was some meet and greets by the stage door sometimes. Sometimes each an individual theatre would have been running a competition to meet Postman Pat and Jess. And so sometimes, yeah, my son Julian popped along,
Hmm.
Emma Weaver, and sometimes some of the other characters, Mrs. Goggins would pop in, or PC Selby, um, just to meet and greet these lucky people. If it wasn't outside the stage door, sometimes it was in the foyer of the theatre. Uh, but that was very nice. And as I say, we tended to get loads of bizarre gifts from people, mainly for Jess. It used to be um, tins of tuna, I seem to remember. Loads of tuna for Jess.
Do you still keep in contact with any of the cast and crew from those tours?
I do. I do. We keep in contact to the degree that it does lead to other work as well. There was a bizarre job that the director of all these shows, Martin Waller, was doing. He was working on, this is just one example, um, a live Teletubby show that was going to go on in Germany, almost like a pop concert for a festival. And
Hmm.
he needed it to be tested out, so he hired a space, I think at somewhere like Shepperton Studios. And I was one of the people he pulled in for those rehearsals to just try out a dance routine. Could we dance in these costumes? So I spent a lovely week as Tinky Winky with him, um, tried to work out and dance very badly. these humongous Teletubby costumes. So yeah, we do stay in touch a lot, and it is great. There's a couple that have dropped off the radar, and I'd love to meet up with them again. But overall, we're all a happy bunch.
Do you have any video footage, photographs or memorabilia from those shows?
I do have. One of my hobbies. I collected a flyer from every theatre we visited, so I do have hundreds of those. But I do have a few photos. Usually, they're not actually from performance things; they're just staged. We're messing about on
Mhm,
the stage in between shows, and I can certainly let you have some of those
mm.
copied. There is one, I think, with the back of a child in it. So maybe we were doing a meet and greet when that photo was taken, actually on the set.
Mhm.
I'll dig that one out for you.
Yeah. What about any video footages or anything like that?
I'm trying to think. No, unfortunately, I don't think I have any video footage. It was last century, I tell you. 97, 98, 99. And no one had really thought about videoing it. And sadly, mobiles weren't around either. So I don't, sadly. I wish I did.
Also, you appeared in a few educational shows such as Number Time, Megamaths. How did you get involved in those shows?
Well, they came about following on from Postman Pat and so on. Number Time was my first one, BBC show.
Mhm,
uh, they asked me in one of the series to play a robot in a shop, um, and I played T1L, a little robot, which was great fun to do. This costume was built around me, and that led directly because that was filmed at the old BBC TV centre.
mm,
I do remember one day being told, "Can you just, in your break, nip upstairs to this office to meet the producers of Megamaths,
mhm,
who are doing a new series, and they're looking for somebody to play Maths Man, the superhero."
mhm,
Um, so I popped up there in between takes, as it were, met those people. So one just instantly led to the other. I think because they had already had done a series with Maths Man, but
mhm,
that actor had gone off to bigger things up in Hollywood and stuff. He'd moved up
mm,
a level, and they very quickly needed somebody that fit the costume. And I was around. I was the right height. I got the costume. I got the job, and then spent. I had a good two TV series as Maths Man. And that was very exciting because we won awards and everything, a Royal Television Society award. That was great fun. And the second series of that was filmed on the Isle of Wight. It was all on location in 2001, I think, 2002. And that one I do remember because it was all on location. I was always outside, standing there literally as a superhero with a cape wafting in the breeze, and always getting stopped by passers-by, literally going, "We know you. You're a maths man. What are you doing here?" And having to say, "We're filming a new series. You're
mm.
now in shot. Would you mind stepping aside?" But that was great fun. That was great indeed. But yes, so all these sort of just landed sort of year after year. One led to another one. The Mr. Men led to directly to Postman Pat. And just after Postman Pat, the company themselves, Children's Showtime,
Mhm.
then toured Noddy,
Yeah.
The Adventures of Noddy. And I had the choice of being either spending another year with them on stage in Noddy or trying something new, um, which is what I tried, and that led directly to Number Time and
Mm.
Megamaths. But I did pop in to see them all. What I watched Noddy, and I did sort of feel envious. I desperately wanted to be in Noddy.
Was that Noddy show full costume heads, or was it what you did like on Post and Pat was actors playing those characters?
Yeah, it was just the same. It's actors playing the characters, so you just get the costume and a wig and a hat, and the rest of it is you and the way you move. I do know that in Noddy they were much more specific about movement.
Hmm.
Um, trying to look a bit like your puppets.
Hmm.
They weren't so. uh, focused on that in Postman Pat. I think that's because in the tour I was in of Postman Pat, the story involved a robot
Yeah.
that Ted Glenn had built. So they wanted us to be natural and let all the puppetry and robotics come from the robot character. So I think that's probably why they weren't so hot on that. The one thing they were quite strict on for us with Postman Pat was the accent that the characters used.
Mm.
All these Greendale voices. They were quite uh,
Because it's like a
specific.
northern accent.
Yeah, they didn't want. They were quite specific. We don't want Yorkshire. We don't want Lancashire. We don't want Derbyshire. They sort of said we want something. Well, just like the television program, we want something that is recognizably northern, but not recognizably of any specific place. And that was quite difficult at first to find. But once you get it, suddenly you go, oh, yes, this accent, it comes really naturally. I like this.
Do you do any more children's shows after Mr. Men and Postman Pat?
I did after TV, I did, but they're all sort of little shows as well that weren't as big scale as this in any way. I also went into writing and writing my own little pantomimes, Tom Thumb and things like that. I've literally just come out of pantomime now, being an ugly sister
Mhm.
in Cinderella. So I'm still doing it in a way. I'm still doing exactly the same style of performing as I did then. What was that, 25 years ago? I'm still doing it now.
Do you think children's theatre has changed when you did those shows?
Yes, I think it has. I sort of mentioned, I think I was lucky that we toured round the country doing all these top venues, these number one venues. And I think the timing was right. There really wasn't anything of the scale of what we were doing then. Um, so it was like an open field, and theatres and audiences loved it because we never competed with pantomime. We always stopped around November and we didn't start again till February or March. So we never competed with pantomime.
Mhm.
But in essence, we were a pantomime. That's more or less what the show is. It's family entertainment with uh, characters and peril and songs and silliness. And and I think what's happened, what happened just after, a few years after Noddy, I became aware that suddenly other producers spotted what was available on the market, and I think they then moved into arena shows.
Mm.
So Bob the Builder and a few other shows like that, even the Teletubbies and Tweenies, um, moved into all these new arenas that were opening,
Mhm.
and so they could cater for many more people in one go. And I think shows of our size sadly sort of bit the dust, really. I do remember the producer Phil Derrick saying, maybe my time is over. I don't want to do arena shows, but I also don't want to do smaller shows. So
Mhm.
maybe I should just let it rest. Maybe it will come back, but it's like the fashion has changed.
Mm.
And I think it's changed since then. From arenas, it then went back down to really small scale um, events and things. So it's up and down all the time, and I think it is always changing. But there is that television link still, the CBBC tour, the CITV tour, doing live shows with these characters that children recognise. They're still out there.
And also, back in your day, everything was done live, and now it's more pre-recorded and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's all pre-recorded with the shows and characters are pre-recorded. The presenters are people who they're the ones who front the live shows. I mean, in essence, that's just what I've done in pantomime.
Mm.
I've just worked with Chris, who was or still is, I should say, a CITV presenter. So he'll do live shows uh, still with CITV, but as I say, he also does pantomime with his character, his children's character, and plays the buttons and
Mm.
wishy-washy kind of role because he's funny and he knows how to do
Mhm.
children's audience reaction.
What's the best advice to someone who wants to get into the business?
I would always say, if you want to get into the business, give it a go. by any means whatsoever. I don't think there is a tried and tested way of doing it. If you ask everybody, they all have a different um, story as to how they ended up in the business. I sort of did a traditional way. As I say, I studied it at school, went to youth theatre, went to drama school, then went out into the world and got work, and I'm still working. Some people just literally walk into a job or meet somebody in a supermarket. You hear stories like that, and they do happen. I think at the end of the day, what you've got to have to be in the industry,
Mm,
and it's a bit of a cliche, but I think firstly you have to enjoy it. You have to be natural with
mm,
it, and you've also got to take on the sad side rejection very well, because most of the job is not getting the job
mm.
that you went for. And if you can, it's nothing personal when you don't get chosen for a job. It's nothing personal. It's just you don't fit what they're looking for. It doesn't mean you're not any good at all. So take that on the chin and look for the next opportunity, but just keep going. That's the whole point.
My last question is, what are you doing nowadays as a performer?
As a performer, I'm still doing exactly the same. If the jobs come along, I'll do it. I am a jobbing actor. So as I say, I've just come out of pantomime.
Mm,
Um, I'll probably do more pantomimes. I do a lot of television commercials,
mm,
especially overseas commercials, because I'm a comedic actor and I use my body well, bit like mime. So language is not important. So I do get a lot of overseas commercials because it's all about the gestures and the body language and the look. It's not about the language.
mm.
So this year, in the last 6 months, I've done a week in Spain and I've been to Norway, um, just for these kind of jobs.
Well, thank you so much for taking part in this podcast, Paul.
Absolute pleasure, Ben. I love that you're doing it. I think that's great. You're collecting your own archive, which is wonderful.
And I feel like sometimes this information will soon get lost, I think, like because there's no footages and the photographs are rarely up there on the internet. So I think we need to get this information out there.
Yep, I think you're right. As long as there's somewhere for people to gather it all together, because you never know when somebody will want to do this again, and this kind of resource that you're collecting will be, as you say, invaluable. It's a wonderful database that you have. So keep
Brilliant.
going.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
You take care now. Thank
Cheers.
you.